My brother stood up at the family dinner table, his face twisted with contempt. He pointed his finger at my 8-year-old daughter and sneered, "You're nothing but a charity case." Then he grabbed a half-eaten chicken bone from his plate and tossed it onto hers. The bone landed with a sick thud, gravy splattering across her untouched food. My parents laughed. They actually laughed. And in that moment, I knew everything was about to change. You won't believe what happened next. But before we continue, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. This story gets intense, and you'll want to see how karma catches up with them. My name is Rachel Montgomery. I'm 37 years old, and I've been living in Billings, Montana for the past decade. I'm a senior financial analyst at a regional investment firm, and I've worked my way up from nothing. My daughter, Sophie, is the light of my life. Her father left when she was 2, and since then, it's been just the two of us against the world. For years, I thought family meant everything. I believed that blood ties were unbreakable, that you sacrifice for your own no matter what. My parents, Richard and Linda, raised me with those values. Or at least, that's what I thought they did. But looking back now, I realize they raised me to be their personal ATM. It started small. 10 years ago, when I first landed my job at Henderson Financial, my younger brother Tyler was applying to colleges. He'd barely graduated high school with a 2.7 GPA, spent most of his time partying, but my parents insisted he deserved the best education money could buy. They called me one evening, their voices sweet and encouraging. "Rachel, honey," your father said over the phone, "Tyler got accepted to Montana State. We're so proud of him." "That's wonderful," I replied, genuinely happy for him despite our complicated relationship. "There's just one small problem," my mother Linda chimed in. "The tuition is $15,000 a year, and with your father's medical bills from his knee surgery, we just can't swing it right now." I felt my stomach drop. I'd just started my job. I was still paying off my own student loans, and I had Sophie to think about. But the guilt was immediate and overwhelming. "How much do you need?" I asked quietly. "Well, if you could cover his first year, just to get him started, we'd pay you back once your father's back to work full-time." I wired them $15,000 the next day. That was the first mistake. They never paid me back. And Tyler never thanked me. In fact, at Thanksgiving that year, he made a snide comment about how some people think money makes them better than everyone else. I bit my tongue and smiled. The requests kept coming. My father's truck needed repairs. $3,000. My mother's dental work. $4,500. Their mortgage payment when dad's hours got cut. $2,000 a month for 6 months. Each time, they promised to pay me back. Each time, I believed them because they were family. By the time Sophie turned 6, I'd given them over $70,000. $70,000. That was a down payment on a house. That was Sophie's college fund. That was my financial security. But I kept telling myself it was temporary, that family takes care of each other, that one day they'd be there for me the way I was there for them. I should have known better. The dinner party that changed everything happened on New Year's Eve, 2024. My parents hosted their annual celebration at their house in the suburbs of Billings. The place was modest but comfortable, paid for in part by my monthly contributions. I'd spent the entire day working on a major presentation for a client, but I'd promised Sophie we'd go. She loved seeing her grandparents, and despite everything, I wanted her to have a relationship with them. We arrived at 6:30, Sophie clutching a homemade card she'd made for her grandparents. She'd spent hours on it, carefully drawing snowflakes and writing, "I love you Grandma and Grandpa" in her best cursive. My heart swelled watching her excitement as we walked up the driveway. My mother answered the door, her smile tight. "Oh, you're here." She didn't hug Sophie, didn't even acknowledge the card my daughter held out eagerly. "Tyler's in the living room. We're eating soon." The first red flag should have been obvious, but I was too tired to notice. My brother Tyler, now 26 and supposedly working as a sales associate at a car dealership, was sprawled on the couch with a beer in his hand. He'd gained weight since I'd last seen him, his face puffy and his eyes bloodshot. "Hey sis," he called out, not bothering to get up. "Still working yourself to death?" "Someone has to," I replied evenly, guiding Sophie toward the dining room. The table was set elaborately. My mother had gone all out with her good china and crystal glasses. My father sat at the head of the table, already halfway through a whiskey. The smell of pot roast filled the air, and my stomach growled despite the tension I felt building in my chest. Dinner started normally enough. My father asked about my work, though his eyes glazed over when I tried to explain the portfolio I'd been managing. My mother fussed over Tyler, serving him the best cuts of meat and the fluffiest dinner rolls. Sophie sat quietly beside me, her small hands folded in her lap, watching everything with those observant eyes children have. Then Tyler started drinking more. By the time dessert came around, he'd had 4 beers and 2 glasses of wine. His face was flushed, and his words were starting to slur. That's when things went sideways. "So Rachel," my father said, cutting into his apple pie, "your mother and I have been talking. We think it's time you stepped up more for this family." I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. "What do you mean?" "Tyler needs help with his rent. He's been going through a rough patch, and we can't keep covering him. You're doing well at that fancy job of yours. Surely you can spare a few hundred a month." "A few hundred a month?" I repeated slowly, feeling heat rise in my chest. "Dad, I've already given you over $70,000 in the past 10 years. I'm raising Sophie on my own. I have my own expenses." "70,000, Tyler scoffed, his voice dripping with contempt. "You act like you're some kind of saint. You make 6 figures. What's a few thousand to you?" "It's my money," I said firmly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Money I earned. Money I need for my daughter's future." That's when my mother spoke up, her voice cold. "Sophie has everything she needs. Look at her. She's dressed well, she's fed. What more does a child need? Tyler is your brother. Family comes first." I looked at Sophie. Her eyes were wide, filling with tears. She wasn't stupid. She understood exactly what was happening. They were saying she didn't matter. That their grown adult son mattered more than my child. "I won't be giving Tyler money for rent," I said, my voice hard. "He's 26 years old. He can figure it out." The table went silent. My father's face turned red. Tyler leaned back in his chair, a nasty smile spreading across his face. And that's when he said it. "You know what your problem is, Rachel? You think you're better than us. You walk in here with your designer purse and your stuck-up attitude, acting like you're doing us some big favor by showing up. But you're nothing. You're a single mom with a bastard kid, and you'll never be anything more than that." Time seemed to stop. Sophie's face crumpled. Tears started streaming down her cheeks. My mother and father didn't say a word. They didn't defend Sophie. They didn't tell Tyler to apologize. Instead, my mother actually chuckled, a soft sound that cut deeper than any knife. Then Tyler did the unthinkable. He picked up the chicken bone from his plate, the one he'd been gnawing on, covered in his saliva and grease, and he tossed it onto Sophie's plate. It landed right on top of her untouched mashed potatoes. "Eat up," he said with a smirk. "That's all someone like you deserves." Sophie started crying. Not the loud, dramatic crying of a tantrum, but the silent, heartbroken sobs of a child who's just learned that the world can be cruel. My vision went red. I stood up so fast my chair fell backward, clattering against the hardwood floor. I looked at my brother, then at my parents. "Everyone will get exactly what they deserve," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Come on, Sophie. We're leaving." I took her hand and walked toward the door. Behind me, I could hear Tyler laughing, my mother calling out that I was overreacting, my father muttering something about disrespect. I didn't turn around. I just kept walking. We got into my car, and I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Sophie was crying in the back seat, her shoulders shaking. I turned around and looked at her, this beautiful, innocent child who'd just been treated like garbage by people who were supposed to love her. "I'm sorry, baby," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." "It's okay, Mommy," she said through her tears, trying to be brave. "I don't need them." But I knew it wasn't okay. And I knew something had to change. I drove through the snowy streets of Billings, my mind racing. The city lights blurred past us, and Sophie had finally cried herself to sleep in the back seat. I needed to talk to someone who would understand. So I drove to my Aunt Margaret's house on the other side of town. Margaret was my father's older sister, but she'd always been different from the rest of the family. She was a retired school teacher, practical and kind, with a sharp mind and an even sharper tongue when needed. If anyone would give me honest advice, it was her. I pulled into her driveway and gently woke Sophie. She blinked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "Are we at Aunt Margaret's?" "Yes, sweetheart. Let's go inside where it's warm." Margaret opened the door before we could knock, her face creasing with concern the moment she saw Sophie's tear-stained cheeks. "Get in here, both of you. I'll make hot chocolate." An hour later, Sophie was curled up on Margaret's couch under a thick quilt, sipping cocoa and watching a nature documentary. Margaret and I sat at her kitchen table, mugs of tea cooling between us as I told her everything. Not just about tonight, but about all of it. The $70,000. The constant requests. The way they treated Sophie like she was less than. The way they treated me like a wallet with legs. Margaret listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each detail. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and took my hand. "Rachel, honey," she said gently but firmly. "You know what you have to do, don't you?" "I think so," I whispered. "They've been using you. For years. They see you as a resource, not as a daughter. And they've just shown you that they're willing to hurt your child to keep that gravy train running. This isn't love. This is financial abuse." The words hit me like a physical blow. Financial abuse. I'd never thought of it that way, but she was right. They'd manipulated my guilt, my sense of family obligation, to extract money from me while giving nothing back. And when I tried to set a boundary tonight, they'd punished me by hurting the person I loved most. "What do I do?" I asked, my voice breaking. "You cut them off. Completely. No more money. No more access to Sophie. No more pretending that this is normal or acceptable. You protect your daughter and yourself, and you let them face the consequences of their own choices." I thought of all the years I'd spent trying to earn their approval. All the sacrifices I'd made. The vacations I'd skipped. The new car I'd put off buying. The retirement fund I'd neglected. All so I could keep my parents comfortable and my brother afloat. "But what about family?" I said weakly, even though I already knew the answer. Margaret squeezed my hand harder. "Family doesn't treat each other this way, Rachel. Real family builds each other up. They celebrate your successes. They protect your children. These people," she gestured vaguely in the direction of my parents' house. "They're related to you by blood, but they stopped being family the moment they decided you were worth less than your bank account." I stayed at Margaret's that night. I couldn't face going home to my empty apartment, couldn't face the silence and the weight of what I needed to do. Margaret set us up in her guest room, and as I lay there with Sophie curled against my side, I made a decision. Tomorrow, everything would change. I woke up early the next morning, New Year's Day, with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Sophie was still sleeping, her face peaceful for the first time since we'd left my parents' house. I carefully slipped out of bed and went to the kitchen where Margaret was already up, making coffee. "I'm going to do it," I told her. "I'm cutting them off." "Good," she said simply, handing me a steaming mug. "What's your plan?" "First, I'm going to text them. No phone call, no chance for them to manipulate me or make me feel guilty. Just a clear, firm message that the bank of Rachel is permanently closed." I pulled out my phone and opened a new message to my parents. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment, years of conditioning making me hesitate. Then I thought of Sophie's face last night, of the chicken bone on her plate, of my mother's cold laugh. And I started typing. "Mom and Dad, effective immediately, I will no longer be providing any financial support to you or Tyler. This includes rent, bills, loans, or any other expenses. Over the past 10 years, I have given you more than $70,000, none of which has been repaid despite repeated promises. Last night's events made it clear that my contributions are taken for granted and that Sophie and I are not valued as family members. This decision is final and non-negotiable. Do not contact me to ask for money. Do not contact Sophie. I need time and space to focus on my daughter and our future. Rachel." I read it over 3 times, then hit send before I could change my mind. The message showed as delivered. Then, almost immediately, the 3 dots appeared showing someone was typing. But I didn't wait to see the response. I turned off my phone and set it face down on the counter. Margaret nodded approvingly. That was perfect. Clear, firm, no room for argument. Now comes the hard part. She was right. Within an hour of turning my phone back on, I had 17 missed calls from my mother, 12 from my father, and 8 from Tyler. There were also 23 text messages, each one more desperate and angry than the last. From my mother, "How could you do this to us? We're your family. We raised you better than this." From my father, "This is unacceptable, Rachel. We need to talk about this like adults. You can't just cut us off without warning." From Tyler, "You're a selfish bitch. I hope you're happy ruining everyone's lives." The messages went on and on. Guilt trips. Accusations. Threats. My mother claimed they couldn't pay their mortgage without my help. My father said I was abandoning them in their time of need. Tyler called me every name in the book and then some. But there was one message that stopped me cold. It was from my mother, sent at 3 in the morning. If you don't reinstate the money by the end of the month, we'll have to tell everyone what kind of daughter you really are. We'll make sure everyone knows you abandoned your family. We'll tell them you're keeping Sophie from her grandparents out of spite. Think about how that will look. It was a threat. A clear, manipulative threat designed to make me fall back in line. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt that old familiar panic rising in my chest. What if people believed them? What if they turned my friends and community against me? Then I remembered Margaret's words. Real family doesn't treat each other this way. And I realized something important. Anyone who would believe their lies without hearing my side wasn't someone I needed in my life anyway. I didn't respond to any of the messages. Instead, I blocked their numbers. All 3 of them. Then I went on Facebook and blocked them there too. If they wanted to spread lies about me on social media, at least I wouldn't have to see it. The next few weeks were hard. Really hard. My mother made good on her threat and posted vague, passive-aggressive status updates about ungrateful children and family betrayal. Several people reached out to me, their messages dripping with fake concern. I heard you're having problems with your parents. Is everything okay? Do you need someone to talk to? I kept my responses brief and dignified. My relationship with my parents is private, and I'm focusing on what's best for my daughter right now. Thank you for your concern. Most people left it at that. A few pushed harder, and I simply stopped responding. But the worst part wasn't the gossip or the social media drama. It was the guilt. Even knowing I'd made the right decision, even remembering how they treated Sophie, I still felt this nagging sense that I was a bad daughter, that I should be the bigger person, that family was supposed to forgive and forget. Margaret and my best friend, Jenna, kept me grounded during those weeks. Jenna was a paralegal at a downtown law firm, sharp and no nonsense. She'd been my friend since college and had witnessed my family's dysfunction firsthand over the years. You did the right thing, she told me firmly over coffee one afternoon. They showed you who they really are. Believe them. But Jenna, I replied, stirring my latte absently. What if I'm the problem? What if I'm the one who's selfish and ungrateful? Jenna reached across the table and grabbed my hand, forcing me to look at her. Rachel, listen to me. You gave them $70,000. You paid for Tyler's college, their bills, their lives. And when you asked them to show your daughter basic human decency, they threw a chicken bone at her. You are not the problem. Her words helped, but the guilt still lingered. It would take me months to fully shake the conditioning they'd instilled in me. The belief that I owed them everything simply because they'd raised me. Then, about 6 weeks after I cut them off, something happened that changed everything. I got a call from a credit card company I'd never done business with. A collections agent wanted to know when I was planning to make a payment on my overdue account. I'm sorry, I said, confused, but I don't have an account with your company. You must have the wrong person. The agent rattled off my social security number, my date of birth, my home address. Is this not you, ma'am? That's me, but I've never applied for a credit card with you. There must be some mistake. There was a pause. Then the agent's voice became more serious. Ma'am, this account was opened 3 years ago in your name. The current balance is $18,462, and it's 6 months past due. We've been sending notices to an address in Billings. My heart started pounding. What address? She read it off. It was my parents' house. The full scope of their betrayal hit me like a freight train. They hadn't just been taking my money. They'd been stealing my identity. Opening credit cards in my name, running up debt, and hiding the bills from me. That's why they'd always insisted I send them money, rather than paying bills directly. That's why they'd been so desperate when I cut them off. It wasn't just about losing my monthly contributions. It was about losing their ability to cover up the fraud. I'll need to file a police report, I told the collections agent, my voice shaking. This is identity theft. I understand, Mom. I'll flag the account and send you the documentation you'll need. I hung up and immediately called Jenna. Within 2 hours, she'd helped me pull my credit report, and the full extent of the damage became clear. 3 credit cards, all maxed out, all in my name, totaling over $47,000 in debt. 2 personal loans from sketchy online lenders, another $20,000. And a car loan for a truck I'd never seen, another $32,000. They'd stolen nearly $100,000 from me. Combined with the $70,000 I'd given them willingly, my family had cost me almost $200,000. Jenna looked at the reports, her face pale. Rachel, this is serious. This is felony fraud. You need to report this to the police immediately. But they're my parents, I whispered, the words sounding hollow even to me. Jenna's expression hardened. They're criminals. They stole your identity and destroyed your credit. What happens when Sophie needs braces or wants to go to college? And you can't help her because your credit is trashed and you're drowning in debt you didn't create? What happens when you can't get a mortgage or a car loan because of what they did? She was right. I knew she was right. But the thought of putting my own parents in jail made me physically ill. I'll think about it, I said weakly. Jenna didn't push, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. She knew I was still making excuses for them, still holding on to the hope that somehow this was all a misunderstanding. It took me 3 days to make the decision. 3 days of barely sleeping, of staring at those credit reports, of imagining all the ways this debt could destroy Sophie's future. Finally, on a cold February morning, I walked into the Billings Police Department and filed a report for identity theft and fraud. The detective assigned to my case was a woman in her 50s named Sandra Martinez. She listened to my story without judgment, taking careful notes. When I finished, she looked up at me with kind but serious eyes. "Miss Montgomery, I need you to understand something. If we pursue this case, and we find evidence that your parents committed this fraud, they will likely face criminal charges. Given the amount involved, we're talking about felony charges that could result in significant prison time." "I know," I said quietly. "Are you prepared for that outcome?" I thought of Sophie. I thought of her future, of the college fund that should exist, but didn't, of the home I should be able to buy her but couldn't because my credit was destroyed. I thought of the chicken bone on her plate and my mother's cold laugh. "Yes," I said firmly, "I'm prepared." Detective Martinez nodded. "Good. We'll start the investigation." It took 6 weeks for the police to build their case. During that time, I heard nothing from my parents. No calls, no messages, no attempts to reconcile or explain. Just silence. I wondered if they knew I'd reported them. I wondered if they cared. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon in late March, Detective Martinez called me. "Miss Montgomery, we've completed our investigation. We have enough evidence to proceed with charges. I need you to come down to the station to review the evidence and give a formal statement." My hands were shaking as I drove to the police station. Part of me still hoped there'd been some mistake, that there was an explanation that didn't involve my parents deliberately destroying my financial life. But when Detective Martinez laid out the evidence, there was no room for doubt. Bank statements showing transfers from the fraudulent credit cards to my parents' personal accounts. Email exchanges between my mother and my brother discussing how much they could charge on my credit before I noticed. Text messages between my father and Tyler about making minimum payments to keep the accounts from going into collections. They'd even forged my signature on loan applications, using documents they'd apparently stolen from my apartment during family visits. It was all there, documented in black and white. A conspiracy spanning 3 years. They'd planned it. They'd executed it. And they'd hidden it from me while asking for more money to my face. I felt nauseous looking at the evidence. "This is really them," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "They really did this." Detective Martinez put a gentle hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry. I know this is difficult. Take all the time you need." I gave my formal statement. I answered every question. I signed every document. And when it was done, Detective Martinez told me that arrest warrants would be issued within 48 hours. I drove home in a daze. Sophie was at Margaret's house, safe and clueless about what was happening. I sat in my apartment, surrounded by silence, and finally let myself cry. Not for my parents, they'd made their choices, but for the family I'd thought I had. For the illusion that had finally shattered completely. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but something made me answer. "Hello, Rachel?" It was my mother's voice, shrill and panicked. "Rachel, the police were here. They arrested your father and Tyler. They're saying we committed fraud. They're saying you reported us. This is insane. You have to tell them there's been a mistake." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "There's no mistake, Mom." I pulled my credit report. I saw the accounts you opened in my name. I saw the loans. I saw all of it. There was a long silence. Then her voice changed, becoming cold and venomous. "You did this. You reported us to the police. Your own family. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Yes," I said calmly. "I protected my daughter's future. I protected myself from people who were willing to destroy my credit and steal my identity while pretending to love me. That's what I did." "We needed that money," she hissed. "Do you know how hard it is for us? Your father's been out of work, Tyler can't hold down a job, and you were making so much. We just needed a little help." "A little help? You stole $100,000 from me. You committed multiple felonies. That's not help, Mom. That's theft. You're going to regret this, Rachel. You're going to regret turning your back on your family. Everyone is going to know what you did. Everyone is going to know you put your own parents in jail. Let them know, I said quietly. Let everyone know that my parents stole from me, committed fraud in my name, and traumatized my daughter. I'm not ashamed anymore. You should be. I hung up before she could respond. And then I blocked that number too. The trial was scheduled for 6 months later. In the meantime, my life started to change in ways I couldn't have imagined. Without the constant drain of supporting my parents and paying off their secret debts, I had money for the first time in years. Real money. I worked with Jenna to dispute all the fraudulent accounts. With the police report and evidence of identity theft, the credit card companies and lenders agreed to remove the debts from my credit report. It took months of paperwork and phone calls, but slowly, steadily, my credit score started to climb back toward where it should have been all along. I opened a college fund for Sophie and started making regular contributions. I took her on a real vacation, our first ever, to Yellowstone National Park. We spent a week exploring, hiking, and seeing geysers. Sophie's face lit up with wonder, and I realized this was what childhood should look like. Joy. Discovery. Security. Margaret continued to be a rock for us. She started taking Sophie to piano lessons every Saturday, something I'd never been able to afford before. My daughter had natural talent, and watching her fingers fly across the keys filled me with a pride I'd never experienced before. At work, I threw myself into my career with renewed focus. Without the constant distraction and stress of family drama, my performance improved dramatically. I closed 3 major deals in the span of 4 months, bringing in over $2 million in new investments for the firm. My boss, Harold Chen, called me into his office one afternoon in early September. "Rachel, sit down," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his massive oak desk. "I need to talk to you about something important." My stomach clenched. Was I in trouble? Had someone complained about my family situation? But Harold was smiling. "I've been watching your work over the past 6 months, and I have to say, I'm impressed. Your numbers are exceptional. Your clients rave about you. And your analysis on the Bergstrom portfolio was some of the sharpest work I've seen in years." "Thank you," I said carefully, not sure where this was going. "The firm is opening a new regional office in Bozeman, and we need someone to head it up. Someone with your skills, your work ethic, and your people management abilities. Rachel, I want to offer you the position of regional director. It comes with a substantial raise, a corner office, and a team of 5 analysts reporting to you." I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. Regional director? But I'm only 37. Don't you need someone with more experience? Harold laughed. "You've been with this firm for 10 years. You've brought in over $8 million in managed assets. You've never missed a deadline, never lost a major client. Experience isn't just about age, Rachel. It's about proven ability. And you've proven yourself beyond any doubt." The position came with a salary increase of $60,000. $60,000. I'd be making more money than I'd ever dreamed possible. Enough to secure Sophie's future. Enough to finally buy a house of our own instead of renting. Enough to breathe without constantly worrying about money. "I accept," I said, my voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm me. "Thank you, Harold. I won't let you down." "You never have," he replied warmly. I called Margaret from my car, tears streaming down my face. "I got promoted. I'm going to be a regional director." Margaret's voice was thick with pride. "Oh, Rachel, I'm so happy for you. You deserve this. You've worked so hard." "I never could have done it if I was still supporting them," I said quietly. "If I was still sending them money every month, still bailing them out. I would have been too stressed, too distracted, too broke to focus on my career." "That's the truth they never wanted you to see," Margaret said gently. "You were always capable of amazing things. They just needed you to believe you weren't, so you'd keep depending on them, keep feeling obligated to them. But look at you now. You're thriving." That night, I took Sophie out for ice cream to celebrate. We sat in a little shop downtown, and I told her about my promotion in terms she could understand. "Mommy got a really important job at work. It means we're going to have more money for things like your piano lessons, and maybe we can get you that art set you've been wanting." Sophie's eyes lit up. "The big one with all the colored pencils?" "The big one with all the colored pencils," I confirmed, laughing. She was quiet for a moment, swirling her chocolate ice cream with her spoon. "Mommy, are Grandma and Grandpa going to come back?" My heart clenched. Sophie rarely mentioned my parents anymore, but I knew the hurt was still there, buried beneath the surface. "I don't think so, baby. What they did wasn't okay, and until they can understand that and make real changes, we need to keep our distance. I'm not sad about it, Sophie said matter-of-factly. They were mean to us. Aunt Margaret is nicer, and she never throws bones at me. Out of the mouths of babes. My 8-year-old daughter had more clarity about the situation than I'd had for years. They were mean to us. It was that simple. You're right, sweetie. They were mean. And we deserve better than that. We deserve people who are kind and who treat us with respect. Like Aunt Margaret. And like Jenna. And you, Sophie added, smiling up at me. You're kind, Mommy. I had to blink back tears. Thank you, baby. You're the kindest person I know. The trial began in October. I'd been dreading this day for months, but I was also ready. The prosecution had built an ironclad case. The evidence was overwhelming. And I was done protecting people who'd shown me nothing but contempt. My father, Richard, my mother, Linda, and my brother, Tyler, all sat at the defendant's table. They looked smaller somehow, diminished. My father's hair had gone completely gray. My mother's face was pinched and sour. Tyler couldn't meet my eyes. The position came with a salary increase of $60,000. $60,000. I'd be making more money than I'd ever dreamed possible. Enough to secure Sophie's future. Enough to finally buy a house of our own instead of renting. Enough to breathe without constantly worrying about money. I accept, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm me. Thank you, Harold. I won't let you down. You never have, he replied warmly. The prosecutor laid out the case methodically. The fraudulent credit cards opened in my name. The forged loan applications. The money trail showing where the stolen funds had gone. It took 2 full days to present all the evidence. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand with my head held high. The prosecutor asked me to describe my relationship with my parents and brother, and I told the truth. I told the court about the years of financial support I'd provided. The defense attorney tried to paint me as vindictive, as a daughter with a grudge seeking revenge against her family. But the evidence spoke for itself. You can't forge someone's signature on loan documents out of love. You can't open credit cards in someone else's name and max them out because you care about them. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Identity theft, fraud, forgery. My father faced 5 to 7 years. My mother, 3 to 5. Tyler, who'd been the one actually using most of the fraudulent cards, faced 7 to 10. I sat in the courtroom as the verdicts were read, feeling nothing. No triumph. No vindication. Just a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. It was over. As they were being let out, my mother turned to look at me one last time. Her face was contorted with rage. I hope you're happy, she spat. You destroyed your family. No, I said quietly, though I doubt she heard me over the commotion. You destroyed our family. I just stopped letting you destroy me too. The months following the trial were strange. I felt lighter, like I'd been carrying a massive weight and hadn't realized how heavy it was until I finally set it down. My credit score soared. My savings account grew steadily. Sophie thrived in her piano lessons and started making friends at school, real friends who came over for playdates and sleepovers. I bought a house. A real house with 3 bedrooms, a backyard, and a front porch. It wasn't a mansion, but it was ours. Sophie picked out the paint color for her room, a soft lavender, and we spent weekends decorating and making it feel like home. Margaret came over often, helping with DIY projects and cooking elaborate meals in my new kitchen. Jenna hosted a housewarming party, inviting colleagues from work and friends from around town. For the first time in my adult life, I felt surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me, not about what I could do for them. One Saturday afternoon in early spring, Margaret and I were sitting on my back porch watching Sophie practice cartwheels in the grass. The sun was warm, and there was a gentle breeze carrying the scent of the flowers Margaret had helped me plant along the fence. You know, Margaret said thoughtfully, I'm proud of you. What you did took incredible strength. Most people in your situation would have kept making excuses for them, kept hoping they'd change. There were plenty of times I wanted to, I admitted. Even after I filed the police report, even during the trial, there were moments where I thought maybe I was the one being unreasonable. Maybe I should forgive them. Margaret shook her head firmly. Forgiveness doesn't mean letting people continue to hurt you. It doesn't mean pretending abuse didn't happen. You protected your daughter and yourself. That's not cruel. That's survival. I watched Sophie attempt a backflip and land hard on her bottom. She laughed, got up, and tried again. That resilience, that refusal to stay down, she'd learned that from me. Not from the version of me who'd been ground down by my family's demands, but from the version who'd finally said enough. "Do you think they'll ever understand what they did wrong?" I asked Margaret. She was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, probably not. People like that, they're so wrapped up in their own narrative, their own victimhood, that they can't see how they've hurt others. They'll go to their graves believing you were the villain in this story." That should have hurt more than it did. But I'd finally accepted that I couldn't control their perception of me. I could only control my own actions, my own choices. And I'd chosen Sophie. I'd chosen my future. I'd chosen myself. A year after the trial, I got a letter from my mother. It had been forwarded from my old apartment to my new house. I stared at it for a long time before opening it, debating whether I wanted to read whatever vitriol she decided to send. But curiosity won out. I opened it carefully, half expecting it to be filled with curses or blame. Instead, it was short. Just 3 paragraphs written in my mother's careful handwriting. "Rachel, I'm writing this from prison. Your father and I have had a lot of time to think about what happened, about what we did. I'm not going to say I understand why you felt you had to report us. I'm not going to say I agree with it. But I've been talking to a therapist here, and she's helped me see some things I wasn't ready to see before. We used you. We took advantage of your kindness and your sense of family obligation. We treated you like a bank instead of like a daughter. And we hurt Sophie, who never did anything to deserve our cruelty. I can't take back what we did. I can't undo the damage. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. Not sorry we got caught. Sorry for what we did to you in the first place. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to write back. But I needed to say it. I'm sorry, Mom." I read the letter 3 times, searching for hidden meanings or manipulations. But it seemed sincere. As sincere as someone like my mother could be. I showed it to Margaret and Jenna, asking their opinions. "It's a start," Jenna said cautiously, "but talk is cheap. Real change would require years of consistent different behavior, not just a letter." Margaret was more blunt. "She's in prison with nothing but time to think about her choices. Whether or not she means it now, the real test will be how she acts when she gets out. If she tries to weasel her way back into your life, if she makes excuses or downplays what happened, then you'll know the apology was just words." I decided not to respond to the letter. Not out of cruelty, but because I'd finally learned that I didn't owe anyone an immediate reaction, not even an acknowledgement. If my mother's apology was genuine, she'd have to live with not knowing whether I'd forgiven her. If it wasn't genuine, my silence would speak volumes. Sophie turned 10 in June. We threw a party at our house, inviting her school friends, their parents, Margaret, and Jenna. The backyard was filled with laughter and the smell of grilled burgers and birthday cake. Sophie wore a purple dress she'd picked out herself and a crown of flowers Margaret had made for her. As I watched her blow out the candles, surrounded by people who genuinely loved her, I felt a profound sense of peace. This was what I'd fought for. This moment. This life. This joy that nobody could take away from us. Later that evening, after the guests had left and Sophie was in bed, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine, reflecting on the past 2 years. I thought about the woman I'd been at that New Year's Eve dinner, so desperate for approval, so willing to sacrifice everything for people who saw her as nothing more than a resource. That woman was gone. In her place was someone stronger. Someone who understood that real family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about mutual respect and genuine care. It's about people who celebrate your victories instead of resenting them. It's about boundaries and healthy relationships built on honesty. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Harold. "Congratulations on another record quarter. You've exceeded every projection. The board wants to discuss expanding your role even further. Let's talk Monday." I smiled. My career was flourishing in ways I'd never imagined possible. Sophie was happy and thriving. We had a home filled with love and laughter. We had Margaret and Jenna and a growing circle of genuine friends. We had everything we needed. And not a single bit of it had come from the people who'd claimed that blood was thicker than water. Turns out, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. The family you choose matters more than the family you're born into. I raised my glass to the darkening sky, making a silent toast. To new beginnings. To second chances. To the courage it takes to walk away from toxicity and build something better. To Sophie, who deserved the world. And to me, who finally believed I deserved it too. The next morning, Sophie came bounding into my room at 7 a.m., full of the unstoppable energy only a 10-year-old possesses. "Mommy, wake up. Aunt Margaret is taking me to the museum today, remember?" I groaned playfully and pulled her into bed with me, tickling her until she shrieked with laughter. Okay, I'm up. Let me make breakfast." As we sat at the kitchen table eating pancakes, Sophie suddenly got quiet. She poked at her food with her fork, her expression thoughtful. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" I asked gently. "I was just thinking," she said slowly, "about that night at Grandma and Grandpa's house. When Uncle Tyler threw that bone at me." My chest tightened. We hadn't talked about that night in months. "Do you want to talk about it?" She shrugged. "Not really. I just wanted to say thank you for taking me away. And for making sure they couldn't hurt us anymore. My friend Mia at school, her parents are mean to her sometimes, and she says she wishes she could leave. But her mom says family has to stay together no matter what. I told her that's not true. I told her that sometimes you have to leave to be safe. Was that okay?" I felt tears prickling my eyes. "Oh, Sophie. That was more than okay. That was exactly right. Family should make you feel safe and loved. If they don't, then it's okay to protect yourself, even if that means distance." "That's what I thought," she said, brightening. Mia said her school counselor told her the same thing. "I'm glad we left, Mommy. Our life is better now." "It really is, baby. It really is." Later that week, I had a meeting with my lawyer to finalize some paperwork related to the restitution my parents were ordered to pay. Thanks to the court ruling, they'd been ordered to repay the $100,000 they'd stolen, plus interest and fees. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Hendricks, had been handling the collections process. "I have good news and complicated news," Patricia said as we sat in her office. "The good news is that we've successfully recovered about $30,000 through the liquidation of some assets your parents owned. The complicated news is that the remaining $70,000 is going to be difficult to collect. Your father's pension was already garnished to pay off other debts, and your mother has no significant assets." "That's okay," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. "I'm not doing this for the money. I'm doing it to make sure they face consequences. If I never see another dollar from them, I'm fine with that. I'm rebuilding my financial life just fine on my own." Patricia smiled. "You know, I've been practicing law for 23 years, and I've handled a lot of family cases, financial elder abuse, inheritance disputes, that sort of thing. But I rarely see someone who's as clear-headed and focused as you are. Most people in your situation are still tangled up in guilt and what-ifs. You've done the work to heal, and it shows." "It wasn't easy," I admitted. "There were a lot of therapy sessions. A lot of nights crying into my pillow. A lot of moments where I questioned whether I'd done the right thing. But every time I look at my daughter, every time I see how happy and secure she is now, I know it was worth it." "Have you thought about what you'll do if your parents try to contact you after they're released?" "I have," I said firmly. "I have a restraining order in place that prevents them from coming within 500 feet of me or Sophie. If they violate it, they go right back to jail. I've also changed my phone number, and they don't have my new address. As far as I'm concerned, that chapter of my life is closed." "What about your brother?" "Tyler," I said, shaking my head. "Tyler is serving his sentence, and from what I understand, he's not taking responsibility for anything. He's told other inmates that I set him up, that I'm a liar. He's completely delusional. If he ever gets out and tries to contact me, the restraining order covers him too." Patricia made a note in her file. "Good. You're protected legally. Now it's just about maintaining your boundaries emotionally." She was right. The legal side was handled. The hard part was continuing to do the internal work, continuing to remind myself that I'd made the right choice, that protecting myself and my daughter wasn't selfish. That fall, Sophie started middle school. It was a big transition, and I'd been worried about how she'd handle it. But she adjusted beautifully. She joined the school choir and made the honor roll. She had friends who came over to study and giggle about boys and practice dance routines in the living room. One evening in October, I was helping her with her math homework when she suddenly said, "Mom, can I ask you something kind of heavy?" "Of course," I said, setting down my pen. "Do you ever miss them? Grandma and Grandpa and Uncle Tyler?" I took a moment to consider my answer. I wanted to be honest with her, but also age-appropriate. "Sometimes," I said carefully, "but not the way they actually were. I miss the idea of them. I miss the family I wished we had." "Does that make sense?" Sophie nodded. "That's how I feel too. Like I miss having grandparents. But I don't miss being treated badly. I'd rather not have grandparents than have ones who are mean." "That's very wise, sweetie. And you know what? You do have people who love you like grandparents. Aunt Margaret adores you. And family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who show up for you, who support you, who make you feel valued." "Like you," Sophie said simply. You always make me feel valued. My heart swelled. And you make me feel like the luckiest mom in the world. That Thanksgiving, Margaret hosted dinner at her house. It was just the three of us, plus Jenna and her new boyfriend, Marcus. It was small, intimate, and filled with genuine warmth and laughter. We went around the table sharing what we were grateful for. I'm grateful for my new piano, Sophie said. And for Aunt Margaret teaching me how to play. And for our house. And for Mom being the best mom ever. Margaret squeezed her hand. I'm grateful for you both. You've brought so much joy into my life. Rachel, watching you find your strength and build this beautiful life, it's been an honor. When it was my turn, I looked around the table at these people who'd stood by me through the hardest time of my life. I'm grateful for second chances. I'm grateful for the courage to walk away from toxicity. I'm grateful for my daughter, who's taught me more about resilience than I ever taught her. And I'm grateful for chosen family, the people who love you not because they have to, but because they want to. There wasn't a dry eye at the table. As winter approached, I found myself reflecting more and more on how far we'd come. It had been 2 years since that awful New Year's Eve dinner. 2 years since I'd cut ties with my parents and brother. 2 years since I'd filed that police report and set in motion the events that would change my life forever. In that time, I'd been promoted twice. I now oversaw 3 regional offices and managed a team of 15 people. My salary had more than doubled. Sophie's college fund was growing steadily. We'd taken 3 vacations, bought a reliable car, and I'd even started a small investment portfolio. But the numbers weren't the most important changes. The real transformation was internal. I no longer woke up with a knot of anxiety in my stomach, wondering what crisis my family would create today. I no longer jumped every time my phone rang, worried it would be another demand for money. I no longer felt guilty for spending money on myself or my daughter. I'd learned to set boundaries in all areas of my life, not just with my family. At work, I no longer took on every project or stayed late every night out of some misplaced sense of obligation. I delegated. I took vacation days. I left work at work and came home to be fully present with Sophie. In relationships, I'd learned to recognize red flags early. I dated occasionally, nothing serious yet, but I was no longer willing to settle for someone who didn't respect my boundaries or my time. I knew my worth now. I wouldn't forget it again. One Saturday in December, as Sophie and I were decorating our Christmas tree, she asked a question I'd been dreading. Mom, do you think Grandma and Grandpa will ever get out of prison? Eventually, I said honestly. They have sentences, and when they serve their time, they'll be released. And what happens then? Then nothing, I said firmly. They're not allowed to contact us. They don't know where we live. They have no way to reach us. Our lives will continue exactly as they are now, safe and happy. What if they try to find us anyway? Then I call the police, and they go back to jail. Sophie, I promise you, I will never let them hurt you again. You are my priority. Your safety and happiness will always come first. She hugged me tightly. I know, Mom. I'm not worried. I trust you. Those 4 words, I trust you, meant more to me than any promotion or raise ever could. I'd earned my daughter's trust by protecting her, by showing her through my actions that her well-being mattered more than anyone else's demands or expectations. As Christmas approached, I decided to do something I'd been thinking about for months. I contacted a local nonprofit that helps single mothers who were struggling financially. I'd seen their advertisements and knew they provided everything from food assistance to job training to emergency housing. I set up a meeting with the director, a passionate woman named Carla Jenkins. I want to make a donation, I told her. A significant one. And I want to establish a fund specifically for mothers who are being financially abused by family members. Carla's eyes widened. That's incredibly specific. And incredibly needed. We see this more than you'd think. Adult children pressured into supporting parents who refuse to work. Spouses controlling all the finances. Siblings taking advantage. It's an invisible form of abuse that traps people in poverty. I know, I said. I lived it. I gave my family over $70,000 over 10 years, and it nearly destroyed me financially. If I can help even one mother break free the way I did, this will be worth it. We discussed the details. I committed to donating $10,000 immediately, with an additional $5,000 every year. The fund would provide emergency grants to mothers trying to escape financial abuse, covering things like security deposits for new apartments, legal fees, therapy costs, whatever they needed to build a new life. This is going to change lives, Carla said, shaking my hand. Thank you for turning your pain into something that helps others. On Christmas morning, Sophie and I opened presents in our pajamas, sipping hot chocolate and listening to carols on the radio. It was peaceful, joyful, everything the holidays should be. No drama, no demands, no walking on eggshells, waiting for someone to explode. After presents, we video called Margaret, who was spending Christmas with some friends from her book club. Then we made a huge breakfast, pancakes and bacon and eggs, and sat around in our pajamas all day watching Christmas movies. That afternoon, as Sophie napped on the couch, exhausted from the morning's excitement, I sat by the window and watched snow begin to fall. Fat, lazy flakes drifting down from a gray sky. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me open it. "Rachel, this is Tyler. I got your number from someone. I'm getting out next month on parole. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to say this. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. For how I treated Sophie, for the fraud, for being such a piece of shit brother. I'm in therapy now, court-ordered, and I'm starting to understand how messed up our family was. I'm not asking you to forgive me or let me back in your life. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and I'm trying to be better. If you want to respond, great. If not, I understand. Either way, I hope you and Sophie are doing well. Tyler." I stared at the message for a long time. Was it genuine? Was it manipulation? Part of me wanted to believe he really had changed. That prison and therapy had cracked through his selfishness and entitlement. But I'd been fooled before. I'd believed too many promises, accepted too many half-hearted apologies. I showed the message to Margaret when she came over later that evening. "What do you think?" I asked. She read it carefully. It sounds sincere, but sincerity in a text message is easy. Real change requires consistent action over time. If he's genuinely sorry, he'll respect your boundaries and won't push for a relationship you're not ready for. "I think I'll respond," I said slowly, "but I'll keep it brief and firm." I typed out a message. "Tyler, I appreciate you reaching out and apologizing. I'm glad you're getting help and working on yourself. However, I'm not ready to have you in my life or Sophie's life. Please respect that boundary. I hope your recovery goes well, but we need space. Don't contact me again unless I reach out first. Rachel." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Within minutes, he responded. "I understand. I respect that. Take care of yourself." And that was it. No argument, no guilt trip, no demands. Just acceptance. Maybe he really had changed. Maybe not. Either way, it didn't matter. I'd set my boundary clearly, and I'd protected it. As New Year's Eve approached, exactly 2 years after the dinner that had changed everything, I found myself feeling nostalgic. Not for my old life, or for my toxic family relationships, but for the journey I'd been on. The growth, the pain, the healing. Margaret and Jenna threw a small New Year's Eve party at my house. We invited a few close friends, people who'd supported us through the past 2 years. We cooked together, laughed together, played games with Sophie and the other kids who were there. At 11:45, as midnight approached, everyone gathered in the living room. We went around sharing our intentions for the new year. When it was my turn, I looked at Sophie, at Margaret, at Jenna, at all these people who'd chosen to love and support us. My intention for this year is to continue building the life Sophie and I deserve. To keep setting healthy boundaries. To keep growing in my career and as a mother. To remember that choosing myself isn't selfish, it's necessary. And to help other women find the courage to do the same. Everyone raised their glasses. As the countdown began, Sophie climbed into my lap, her arms around my neck. We counted down together. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year. The room erupted in cheers and hugs. Sophie kissed my cheek. "I love you, Mommy. I love you too, baby. More than anything in this world." As the party wound down and guests started to leave, I walked out onto the front porch for a moment of quiet. The night was cold but clear, stars visible in the dark Montana sky. I thought about who I'd been 2 years ago, terrified and broken, driving through the snow with my crying daughter in the backseat. I thought about the woman I was now, confident and secure, with a career I loved and a daughter who thrived. I thought about my parents and brother, serving time in prison for what they'd done. I didn't feel triumphant about their punishment. I just felt relieved that they could no longer hurt us. Mostly, I felt grateful. Grateful for Margaret and Jenna. Grateful for my career success. Grateful for Sophie's resilience. Grateful for the strength I'd found within myself. Strength I didn't know I had until I was forced to use it. The door opened behind me, and Margaret stepped out, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. "You okay out here?" "Yeah," I said, smiling. "Just thinking about everything that's happened. How different my life is now." "Better different?" "So much better." I look back at who I was, how I let them treat me, and I barely recognize that person. Margaret put her arm around me. That person was doing the best she could with what she knew. You can't regret being kind or generous. You can only learn when to stop. "When did you get so wise?" I teased. 70 years of living, she replied with a laugh. "You pick up a few things." We stood there together in comfortable silence, watching the neighborhood sleep. Inside, I could hear Sophie's laughter as she played with one of the other kids who'd come to the party. That sound, more than anything, told me I'd made the right choices. "You know what the best part is," I said to Margaret. "I don't have to spend this year anxious about what they'll ask for next. What crisis I'll have to solve, what emergency will require my money. I can just focus on living my life, on being Sophie's mom, on being happy." "That's what freedom looks like," Margaret said softly. "And you earned it." As we went back inside, I made a silent promise to myself. I would never again let anyone make me feel guilty for protecting myself and my daughter. I would never again sacrifice our well-being for people who didn't value us. I would never again confuse obligation with love. I'd spent years believing that family meant unconditional sacrifice, that love required endless giving without receiving. But I'd learned a harder, more important truth. Real love is reciprocal. Real family builds each other up. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who are determined to tear you down. The next morning, New Year's Day, I woke up to Sophie jumping on my bed. "Mom, wake up. It snowed last night. Can we build a snowman?" I groaned but smiled, letting her pull me out of bed. We bundled up in our winter gear and spent the morning in the backyard, building the world's ugliest snowman and having a snowball fight that left us both soaking wet and laughing hysterically. Later, after hot showers and mugs of cocoa, we curled up on the couch with a blanket. Sophie pulled out her journal, a gift from Margaret, and started writing. I picked up a book I'd been meaning to read, but I couldn't focus. I kept watching Sophie, this incredible little human I'd been blessed with, and feeling overwhelmed with love and pride. She looked up and caught me staring. "What?" "Nothing," I said, smiling. "I'm just really happy." "Are you happy?" Sophie thought about it for a moment, her face serious. "Yeah, I'm really happy. I like our life, just us. Well, us and Aunt Margaret and Aunt Jenna. Is it weird that I don't miss having more family?" "Not at all," I assured her. "Quality over quantity. Remember? It's better to have a few people who really love you than a bunch of people who treat you badly." "That's what I thought," she said, going back to her journal. I returned to my book, but my mind was still wandering. I thought about the journey we'd been on, the obstacles we'd overcome. I thought about the version of myself who'd sat at that dinner table 2 years ago, watching her daughter be humiliated and finding the strength to finally say no. That moment had been terrifying. Walking out that door, not knowing what would happen next, just knowing I couldn't stay. Filing that police report, knowing it would destroy any chance of reconciliation. Watching my parents and brother be led away in handcuffs, feeling sick but also relieved. None of it had been easy, but all of it had been necessary. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app. I'd been journaling sporadically over the past 2 years, documenting my thoughts and feelings as I processed everything. I scrolled back to an entry from 2 years ago, written the night after that horrible dinner. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. Everyone says family is forever, that you forgive and forget. But how do you forgive someone for humiliating your child? How do you forget years of being used and manipulated? I'm scared. I'm scared they'll turn everyone against me. I'm scared I'll regret this. But I'm more scared of what will happen to Sophie if I don't protect her now. She deserves better than this. We both do. Tomorrow, I start building a new life. I hope I'm strong enough." I smiled, reading those words from my past self. I wanted to reach back through time and tell her that yes, she was strong enough. That the path ahead would be hard, but she'd survive it. That 2 years from now, she'd be sitting in her own house, watching her happy daughter write in a journal, feeling more at peace than she'd ever thought possible. I started a new entry. 2 years later, and I made it. We made it. The scared woman who wrote that last entry would barely recognize me now. I'm not the person who accepts crumbs and calls it love. I'm not the person who sets herself on fire to keep others warm. I'm someone who knows her worth, who protects her child fiercely, who builds healthy boundaries and enforces them. I'm someone who chose herself. And I'd make the same choice 1,000 times over. That spring, My company asked me to speak at a regional conference about leadership and overcoming adversity. At first, I was hesitant. Did I really want to share my story publicly? Did I want to talk about my family's crimes and my decision to report them? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this was an opportunity. How many other people were trapped in similar situations, being financially abused by family members, too guilty or ashamed to ask for help? If my story could help even one person find the courage to break free, it would be worth the vulnerability. I worked on my speech for weeks, practicing in front of Margaret and Jenna, refining my message. The day of the conference, I stood backstage, my hands shaking, wondering if I'd made a mistake. Then I thought of Sophie, sitting in the front row with Margaret, watching me with those proud eyes. I walked onto that stage, looked out at 200 faces, and I told my story. Not all of it, I kept some details private, but enough. Enough to show them what financial abuse looks like. Enough to explain how manipulation can masquerade as family obligation. Enough to demonstrate that choosing yourself isn't selfish. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then the applause started. People stood up. Some were crying. And after I left the stage, at least 20 women approached me privately, telling me their own stories of family financial abuse, thanking me for giving voice to something they'd been ashamed to admit. That night, driving home with Sophie asleep in the back seat, I felt a sense of purpose I'd never experienced before. My pain had meaning now. My struggle had created understanding. And maybe, just maybe, I'd helped light the path for others still searching for the exit. As summer arrived, Sophie and I settled into a comfortable rhythm. Work was busy but fulfilling. Sophie's piano skills continued to improve. We took a 2-week vacation to Seattle, exploring the city, visiting museums, eating our way through Pike Place Market. One evening, sitting on our hotel balcony overlooking Elliott Bay, Sophie asked me another one of those questions that reminded me she was growing up faster than I was ready for. Mom, do you ever think about dating? Like, finding someone to be with? I was surprised by the question. Where's this coming from? She shrugged. Some of my friends' parents are dating, and I was just thinking, you're always alone. Well, not alone because you have me. But you know what I mean. Don't you want someone to love you? I do love someone, I said, pulling her close. I love you. And I love Aunt Margaret and Aunt Jenna. My life is pretty full. But what about like, boyfriend love? Don't you want that? I considered my answer carefully. Someday, maybe. But right now, I'm focused on us. On building our life, on making sure you have everything you need. When and if the right person comes along, someone who treats us both with respect and kindness, I'll be open to it. But I'm not in a hurry. I'd rather be happily single than in a bad relationship. That makes sense, Sophie said, snuggling against me. For what it's worth, I think you're pretty great just how you are. Thanks, baby. I think you're pretty great too. As the sun set over the water, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I felt content. Complete. Not because I had a perfect life, no one does, but because I had a real life. An authentic life built on honesty and healthy relationships and mutual respect. That fall, on the 3rd anniversary of that fateful New Year's Eve dinner, I received a letter from my mother. She'd been released from prison 2 months earlier. The letter was long, several pages of careful handwriting. I won't share the entire letter, some things are private, but the core message was this. She'd spent her time in prison in intensive therapy. She'd been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder and was working on treatment. She'd come to understand how deeply she'd hurt me, how she'd manipulated and used me for years. She wasn't asking to be part of my life. She wasn't making excuses or minimizing what she'd done. She was simply apologizing, deeply and specifically, for each instance of harm she'd caused. And she was telling me that she understood if I never wanted to see or speak to her again. I sat with that letter for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to throw it away and pretend I'd never received it. Another part of me wanted to respond, to engage, to try to build some kind of relationship with this version of my mother who claimed to have changed. In the end, I did neither. I put the letter in a box in my closet, not ready to respond but not willing to throw it away either. Maybe someday I'd be ready to open that door. Maybe not. Either way, it was my choice to make on my timeline. What I did do was sit down with Sophie and have an honest conversation. Your grandmother sent me a letter. She's out of prison, and she says she's sorry for everything that happened. I thought you should know, in case you have feelings about it. Sophie was quiet for a moment. Do you want to see her? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me is curious if she's really changed. But another part of me knows that even if she has, I don't owe her forgiveness. I don't owe her a relationship. I gave her chances for years, and she chose to hurt us. I'm okay with our life the way it is. Me too, Sophie said. I don't need her, Mom. I have you. I have Aunt Margaret. I have a good life. Maybe one day I'll want to know her, but right now, I'm happy with things how they are. Her maturity stunned me. At 11 years old, she had a clarity about relationships and boundaries that most adults never achieved. Okay, I said. If you ever change your mind, we can talk about it. I know, she said simply. But I don't think I will. And that was that. We moved on with our evening, making dinner together and arguing playfully about whose turn it was to pick the movie. The letter from my mother sat in its box, unopened and unresponded to. And I felt at peace with that decision. As the holidays approached once again, I reflected on how far we'd come in 3 years. From that broken, desperate woman fleeing a toxic dinner to this confident, successful person with a thriving career and a happy child. From financial instability and constant stress to security and peace. From feeling trapped by obligation to feeling free to choose my own path. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been moments of crushing doubt, nights of tears and fear, days where I questioned every decision I'd made. But I'd survived it all. More than survived, I'd thrived. And as I looked ahead to the future, I felt optimistic in a way I never had before. Whatever came next, I knew I could handle it. I'd proven to myself that I was strong enough, brave enough, worthy enough to protect myself and my daughter. That was a gift no one could take away. So here's what I want you to remember if you're in a situation like I was. You don't owe anyone your financial security. You don't owe anyone your peace of mind. You don't owe anyone access to your children. Family isn't an excuse for abuse, financial or otherwise. And if you find the courage to walk away, to set those boundaries, to protect yourself and the people you love, you're not being cruel. You're being wise. You're not being selfish. You're being strong. You're not destroying your family. You're saving yourself. It won't be easy. People will judge you. They'll call you heartless or ungrateful. They'll tell you that family is forever, that you should forgive and forget. But those people haven't walked in your shoes. They haven't sacrificed their futures for people who saw them as nothing more than ATMs. They haven't watched their children be humiliated by people who should love them. You have. And you deserve better. Your children deserve better. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is walk away. 3 years ago, I walked away from a dinner table with my daughter's hand in mine, not knowing what the future would hold. Today, I'm standing in my own home, watching my daughter thrive, building a career I love, surrounded by people who genuinely care about me. I walked away, and I found myself. If you're in a situation like mine was, I hope you find the courage to do the same. Because on the other side of that fear, that guilt, that manipulation, there's freedom. There's peace. There's a life where you're not constantly on edge, constantly giving, constantly trying to earn love that should be freely given. You deserve that life. And you're strong enough to claim it. As I finish this story, Sophie just called me from the other room. She wants help with a new piano piece she's learning. And I'm going to go help her, not because I have to, not because anyone's guilting me into it, but because I want to. Because she's my daughter and I love her, and this is what real family looks like. This is what freedom looks like. And it's worth fighting for. The end.